You can see I've made a motion controlled gun here. This is the gyro controlling the aiming. The gun has a limited number of bullets, which we can reload at any time. And of course we can reload at any point, and we can fire to cancel the rest of the reload. The targets have a sound and an effect when they run out of health. There's also an infinite ammo toggle, and there's a free cam toggle so we can move around. I'm going to be showing exactly how all of this is made in the next few videos, so if you're interested in learning, stick around, subscribe so you can see the whole thing. Let's get right into it. Okay, so to get started on the gun, we're going to get out a cube here. Now this cube is not going to be visible, but this will allow us to stamp things onto it, like our crosshair and also some logic. So we're going to use this cube for now. Let's get out the paint and let's go ahead and make ourselves a little crosshair. Pick a color that's bright and easy to see, like a bright red, or we could do like a bright green. Let's go with bright green. And we will be using the, you could use brush or draw, doesn't really matter. Let's go ahead and put it on surface snap though. And we're going to decrease the grid size here and try and remember where the middle one is. Now we can go ahead and scale this down, and to make the crosshair I'm just going to draw these little lines here going away from the center point, just like that. There's a little crosshair. Now that may be a little too big. What you could do instead is use the center point as the point of intersection. Oops, that way there's all of them like that. And so if we scope out and then open up the properties of the painting, we can add a little glow to make it a little brighter. We can add some finish. We can make this rough, and let's make it waxy. So obviously, if you wanted to be super meticulous, you'd probably want to paint a little bit more. We can go into the fleck properties, turn down ruffle, turn the looseness all the way down, or the impasto. This makes sure that it's flat. Since it's going to be a 2D cursor, we don't want it to be, you know, loose or anything like that. Okay, so there's the crosshair, and now let's go ahead and get out a chip to hold all the logic for this, and I'll stamp it down. Okay, so now I'm going to group the block itself as well as the painting and the chip and create that as one group. So now if we go into here, we can open up the microchip, and what we want to do is make sure the microchip scope out all the way, and we want to make sure the microchip applies to the entire group so that anything inside of this microchip affects the entire group. So for example, if I put a rotator on here, it would rotate all three things: the microchip, the block, and the painting itself. And, you know, anything else in here. If we put a destroyer, it would destroy the entire object. That's why we want to scope out and make sure that it applies to the overall group. And so in this group, we don't want this sculpt to be collidable, and eventually we can turn the visibility off so that we just have this crosshair. But for now we can leave it on just so we can see. And so what this is going to do is, since we want it to be our crosshair and we want it to be controlled by us, we're going to put a controller sensor in here. And the idea here is that this is going to be a gyro controlled crosshair. So let's make it follow the imp and make sure the follow imp behavior is set to follow imp, and we can force possess. So what happens with this is that when we play, this block follows us around, and as you can see, so does the crosshair. And if the box is invisible, then we can see how this crosshair is now controlled by our gyro sensor. So wherever I move the controller, it's just like controlling the imp, but now we have a crosshair. So to make the gun actually fire, we're going to need a couple things. I'm going to get out a microchip, and this will be for firing a bullet. We'll get out a we can get out a node, and that'll take the input from the controller, and we'll get out an emitter, and this will emit our bullets. So let's just say we're going to use, we can use R2 for example. Now if we're going to use R2, the R2 value, let's see if we put this on remote, you can see that it is a value from 0 to 100%, so somewhere between 0 and 1. We don't necessarily want to shoot the second R2 hits, you know, something low in case somebody accidentally touches it. So in order to get around that, we can use a calculator. And so if we plug the value of R2 in here, we can set a dead zone for the trigger. So let's say we want it to be greater than 0.5. And here, let's, just to show how this works, we'll get the switch, we'll plug that into there. So we can see the switch is off, and when we barely touch it, it's still off. But once we get past 50%, then the switch would turn on. So this is what we'd want to use in our input. And just to make this, we don't want this to be a constant signal, so we'll put this in a signal manipulator and put it on pulse, and then the pulse can come into the node. So now when we press the right trigger, it sends a pulse and it doesn't keep a constant signal. Now so this node will come in here and it'll power the emitter, and so the emitter will set to once, and we can turn the time between emits all the way down, and we'll figure out the emit speed, but first we should make a projectile. So let's go back into sculpt mode, and we'll get a little sphere out, and we can go ahead and make it a metal texture, and let's see, how does that look? That actually looks kind of nice on the default color, but let's pick like a gray. Let's go ahead, we can see the crosshair here, right? And so we don't want this thing to be necessarily too big or too small, but so I'll just make it something like that. Yeah, so I mean, it may be too big, but we can always play around with that later. So there's our projectile. So let's say we want to use this emitter to emit this bullet. Now first things first, we want it to emit from where the crosshair is, right? So I've made sure to align it to the grid, and it's sitting exactly where the crosshair is. And obviously we don't want it to shoot this direction. We kind of want it to shoot out in front of us. Ooh. But using this arrow alone won't be enough. So I'll show you why. Let's turn the speed up on this thing. Let's change it to like 20. So with the arrow forward, we can see what happens when we go into play mode. We can see here's our crosshair, and when we press fire, it shoots a bullet, right? But it kind of shoots in the same direction, and it's not shooting where we're aiming, right? So if I wanted to shoot down here where my cursor is, and then I press R2, the bullet isn't going in that direction, right? So we need to determine the direction of travel for the bullets to go. Luckily, the emitter has an input called scene space direction, and so we're going to need to plug something into here to tell it exactly the direction we're aiming. It's actually pretty easy to do. So what I'll do is I'll just move this down, and we'll get out another microchip, and this will determine our direction of travel. So I'll go ahead and name this microchip we're currently working in as fire gun. And I'll also name this new microchip calculate direction. Let's go in here and get a node out, and this node will eventually plug something into this scene space direction in the emitter. Okay, so how do we want to fire the bullet? Obviously we want it to go through the cursor, or through the crosshair, and we want it to go through the crosshair from where we're looking at it, right? So if the crosshair is over here on the left, then we want to calculate the trajectory from where we are looking at it through this point in space. Now you'll notice I don't have any imps. I hit a some sort of terrible issue in Dreams. All my imps are gone. It's terrible. I can't see anything. Using the move controllers without the imps is so hard. Hopefully they'll fix it soon. Okay, so we're going to need a couple things. Let's get out a tag. And the reason we want to use a tag is because there's a scene space transform on it, right? So let's get the tag out, and we'll make sure that that is exactly in the same spot as the crosshair, right? So we can label it if we want to, but we don't have to, but I'll go ahead and label it. And if we get a splitter out, we can take the scene space transform and split that, and we can use the position, right? Now, we also need the position of where we are looking at it, and one easy way to do that is inside of global settings on the settings 2 output. There's a camera transform output, and this gives us the position, rotation, and scale of the camera that's currently active. So here we have the position of the camera and the position of the crosshair, and all we need to do is get a calculator out, and we'll set it to subtract, and we will just subtract the position of the camera from the crosshair location, and that will be our direction of travel. So there we have that. So now you can see when I aim, the bullet goes in the direction of the crosshair. Now you can see it's dipping down a little bit, and that is because the bullet is currently being affected by gravity. So let me go ahead and just for now we can turn this off. Depending on what kind of gun you're making, that may make sense. If you're using if you're making like a laser gun, you wouldn't want gravity, right? But now we can see the bullets go exactly where I'm aiming every time I shoot, right? And it's all based on the direction of the camera. So no matter which direction I'm looking, the bullet will always go where the crosshair is aiming. If this doesn't make sense, instead of using like a camera, let's just say we had a different tag, right? Let's say we had a crosshair like this, or a different tag. Let's go ahead and use this scene space transform. So here we have this tag and this tag. What this is doing is it's calculating, it's taking the subtraction between these two, so it's calculating this line here, right? And the line goes on forever, and so if the bullet were to be fired, it would travel along this line, right? Here, let me switch this back to remote control real quick so we can see how that looks. Oops. You can see every time I fire, it goes in this direction, right? And so if I were to move this tag over here and then fire, you could see it be traveling along this line. So that's all that's happening there. Go ahead and undo all that stuff. Now I'm also going to get another node here, and this will be this will just go straight through from the input into the output, and this will let us know that we've fired the gun. We have a gun that shoots. Now we're obviously going to want some sound, right? Because a gun doesn't seem that powerful if there's no sound. So let me find a gunfire sound real quick. I believe that Media Molecule has one that we can use. If we go into combat, guns and blasters, here, perfect, revolver sound, right? So we can have this in here, and what we can do is every time this comes in, we can power it, and let's see how that looks. Nice.